Welcome to Craft Brew. Let's make some beer. Craft Brew has a variety of beer kits available both in ales and lagers. Today we're going to be making the American Pale Ale. Every kit comes with specific instructions inside the kit, but most of what you'll see in this video is applicable to any of the ales in the Craft Brew kits. The lagers have a little bit different style of fermentation, and we'll have a lager video for you to watch. Link will be in the description, and that explains a little bit more about the lagering process and how that's different from ale kits. So in this video, we're gonna open up this kit, see what's inside, and then brew some beer. You're gonna need to bring a few things to the table, including a vessel large enough to hold about a gallon of water. That's for your sanitizer. And you're gonna need a vessel that holds around 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of liquid. That's gonna be what we brew our beer in. On brew day, you're gonna need some ice to chill down your wort to yeast pitching temperature. And of course, at some point, you're gonna need some bottles in order to bottle your beer. Craft Brew has the deluxe bottling kit. That's what we would recommend for bottling your beer, but you can reuse commercial beer bottles too, as long as you have a capper and some caps to cap them with. So let's take a look at what's inside our ale kit. Of course, there's your guide. You've got this little baggie, which includes an airlock, a stopper, a hose clamp, and this little cap that goes on the end of your racking cane. You have a thermometer, the racking cane that we mentioned earlier, tubing, a funnel, your fermentation vessel, in this case, a 1 gallon demijohn, aka carboy, and this bag, which has everything you need to make your beer. We've got dry malt extract, a couple bags of hops, a straining bag for your grains, sanitizing solution, and yeast, and the specialty grains. These grains are going to give some flavor and color to your finished beer, and the malt extract is going to provide the fermentable sugars to make your beer alcoholic. So the first thing we need to do is mix up our sanitizer. We're going to do that in this bucket by putting half of this packet into 1 gallon of water. We'll reserve the other half for sanitizing later when we get to the bottling phase. I like to do this by splitting the pack down the middle, making sure you've got equal parts on both sides, and a nice crease in the middle there. And then you can just open this right over the bucket, and only half comes out. The other half we save for later. We use our racking cane to stir up the sanitizer, making sure all those crystals get dissolved. Let's start by getting our water heated up so we can steep our grains. We're going to do that by placing 1 full gallon of water into this pot and setting the temperature for high. While we're waiting for this to heat up to 155 degrees Fahrenheit, we'll go ahead and put our grains in our steeping bag so they're ready to steep. As soon as that hits 155 on our thermometer, we'll cut the heat, put the grains in, and let that sit for 20 minutes. Since we're shooting for 155, just slide the rubber marker down to 155 on your thermometer, and that way you can accurately and easily tell when it's hit our target temperature. When you're testing the temperature of the water, make sure you don't touch the thermometer to the bottom of your pot. You want to touch the water And you want to kind of move it around and make sure you're getting an average temperature inside the pot. Here we're at 154, right at about 155 now. So we're going to turn off our burner. We'll place our grain bag in, making sure that it gets completely saturated. And then we're gonna set a timer for 20 minutes, and then we'll pull the bag after 20 minutes. Now, I'm using a cast iron Dutch oven here. It's very heavy, very well insulated. So this is gonna maintain our steeping temperature of 155 degrees Fahrenheit very easily. If your stock pot is a lot thinner, you might have to cycle a little bit of heat to keep it at 155, and you can just check it periodically with your thermometer to make sure that it's staying at that temperature for steeping. Here we're just gonna leave it covered, and we'll be back in 20 minutes to check on it. It's been 20 minutes. Let's go ahead and pull our grain bag out. You'll notice that the color of the wort has started to turn a nice amber to gold. That means our grains did their job. So dunk it a few times, make sure you rinse them well, and just drain it without squeezing. Squeezing the bag can lead to the release of excessive tannins. Some people don't like those flavors, so we recommend against squeezing the bag. Just drain it naturally, and then it can be discarded. Now we're gonna bring this up to a boil, and as soon as we hit a boil, we're gonna cut the heat so we can add our dry malt extract, and then we'll bring it back up to a boil so we can add our hops. All right, we just started boiling, so I'm going to turn off our heat. We're gonna open our bag of dry malt extract. Now we're gonna use a metal spoon to stir in our dry malt extract very slowly and gradually, making sure that it mixes throughout and you break up any clumps as you see them. If you see a clump appearing, just go ahead and mash it against the side, and that'll break it up, and that way you can make sure that it gets dissolved. All right, seeing no more clumps, let's bring this back up to a boil, and as soon as it starts boiling, we'll add our first hops addition. You're gonna wanna monitor this closely because you can get a situation called a boil over if it boils too hard. So really keep an eye on it while you're bringing it up to a boil and make sure that it doesn't boil over. So as it starts to bubble and churn, go ahead and reduce your heat. You're not looking for a big, hard, driven boil on this beer. You're looking for a nice, steady boil. Because of all the sugar that's in here now, this is a thick liquid, and that is what can contribute to boiling over when it gets too hot too fast. As it comes to a boil, proteins are gonna start rising to the top, and you're gonna get some foam on the top of your wort. That mat of particulate will eventually break, and your boil will start. And that's called your hot break. It's important to add your hops after hot break has happened. We're starting to see some bubbles come up here, so I'm going to dial back my heat so that way we don't get a boil over. Once your boil starts, as you're moving through hot break, that can take about 2 to 3 minutes. So you want to let that process play out before you add your first hops addition. For this American Pale Ale, the first hops addition is pearl hops, and those go in for 60 minutes. So we're gonna put them in now. We'll set a timer for 58 minutes, and when that goes off, we will add our other hop addition, which is Cascade hops, and those go in our final 2 minutes of the boil. Now that we're through the hot break, let's go ahead and add the first hops addition. Those go right on in. And again, you don't want a really hard boil here, because the harder your boil, the more volume you're going to be boiling off of your 1 gallon of wort. So we just want to get our heat dialed in so it's boiling, but not aggressively boiling. And I think that looks pretty good. So we are on a medium heat here. We're gonna set a timer and we'll be back in 58 minutes. With 2 minutes to go on our boil, now it's time to add our Cascade hops. Okay, our boil is complete, so let's turn off the heat. We're gonna cover this so no airborne organisms get in there, and we're gonna go put it in an ice bath in the sink so it can come down to yeast pitching temperature. We want it pretty close to room temperature before we add our yeast. Cooling this down quickly is critical because you want to maintain exactly the flavor of the recipe, and the longer the hops sit in warm liquid, the more flavor and aromatic compounds you're gonna extract from those hops. And we don't want it to go overboard. So let's cool this down as fast as we can by putting it in an ice bath. All right, our wort is about 73 to 74 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's perfect. Let's get our gear sanitized, and then we'll get this transferred over to our carboy for fermentation. This is a no rinse solution, so don't worry about rinsing it off after you sanitize. Okay, we're gonna funnel our wort into our carboy. This is kind of tricky. It really helps if you have a really big funnel. You can avoid some drips. If you're really uncertain about pouring from your stock pot into the carboy, I understand that. You can use a sanitized measuring cup to kind of ladle from one vessel to the other. Just make sure you put that in your sanitizer for a couple of minutes before you get started. I'm just gonna put down a towel and pour. And your funnel may create a little bit of vacuum pressure as you're pouring. It's nice to be able to vent that, but if you're using two hands for this, that's gonna be a little tough. I'm gonna use a straw. This is just a fast food straw right out of the wrapper. Sanitize it. We're gonna put it through that hole in the funnel and right down into the carboy. And that will help vent the funnel so that way you don't get a vacuum that prevents the funnel from draining quickly. The secret ingredient is confidence. You're gonna see a little bit of solids at the bottom. Let's leave those behind just by stopping our pour before too many solids go in. Now look at that. We've had quite a bit of boil off here, and we've reduced it by about 1/3 of a gallon. So we're gonna get some water, go ahead and top this up to the 1 gallon mark, and then we'll proceed. All right, our liquid line is just below the embossed letters that say 1 gallon. So we're ready to pitch our yeast. We'll hold on to everything in this baggie until later, except for the bung, which we'll go ahead and get sanitized. The yeast is the microbe that turns our sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide. So we're gonna add this little microbe, our yeast, into our brew. Over the course of a week to 2 weeks, it will eat through all of the fermentable sugars that it can, and then after a couple weeks, it'll be ready for us to put in bottles. That same yeast is gonna eat through some added sugar that we put in the bottles and turn it into CO2 and carbonate our beer. So this is the moment you've been waiting for. When you add your yeast to your brew, you are now a beer maker. Congratulations on a job well done. Now we just need to aerate this and put a blow-off tube on it so it can start fermentation. So we're gonna take our sanitized bung, put it in the top there, put our thumb over the top of it, our sanitized thumb, and give it a good shake for about 60 seconds. Aerating our wort gives it plenty of oxygen because the yeast need oxygen in order to do their synthesis. So oxygen is incredibly important to introduce at this juncture, but you don't want to introduce any more oxygen for the rest of the life of your beer. Pro tip, if you have trouble with the bung holding in the neck of the carboy, use a dry, clean paper towel and dry off the bung and the neck of the carboy on the inside, and then press it in about there. That way you have a little bit of a lip hanging over the edge and you don't lose your bung inside of your carboy. So we're gonna take our sanitized tubing we're gonna place it in the hole in our bung, and then the other end is gonna go into a jar of water. Fermentation will get started over the next 24 to 48 hours, and when it does, you'll start to see bubbles coming out of the tube in here. This basically acts as a valve. Things can get into the water, but it's very difficult for things to get up the tube and into your beer. So we'll use this for the first few days. Once fermentation activity dies down a little bit, we'll switch it out with our airlock. So I'll show you that in a few days. In the meantime, put this in a cool, dark place and let it ferment. Our beer has completed primary fermentation, so now it's time to get it bottled and primed so that way we can have carbonated bottles of beer. We're going to be using the deluxe bottling kit for this today. There are a number of ways you can bottle your beer. You can use a bottling kit like this that uses a capper and crown caps, or you can use flip top bottles as a pretty easy way of having resealable beer bottles. So the first thing we need to do is use our sanitizer to sanitize all of our gear. So we're going to add half that packet to 1 gallon of water, get everything sanitized, and then we'll get our siphon going and siphon our beer. In this video, we're going to be demonstrating how to use carbonation drops to carbonate your beer. These are just little pre-measured drops of sugar. 1 per bottle will carbonate your beer. The alternative is to rack your beer onto some priming sugar mixed with hot water. That way your beer will mix thoroughly with the sugar, so you have the same amount of sugar going into each bottle, and then you'll just bottle from there. Both accomplish the exact same thing, which is giving your yeast a little bit of sugar to eat to convert to carbon dioxide that will become suspended in the bottles and make your beer carbonated. So I'm going to get everything sanitized and ready to go, and then we'll get our siphon going and get this beer in bottles. The deluxe bottling kit comes with a capper and crown caps. Super convenient. This is enough crown caps for 3 batches of beer. Now we're going to get our carbonation drops in, and this is 1 drop per 12-ounce bottle of beer. To get our siphon started, we're going to fill this tube with some sterile water. This is water that has been boiled and allowed to cool a little bit. We're going to fill the entire tube with water. And then that water is going to pull a vacuum that allows gravity to transfer our beer from the vessel up here to our bottles down here. So simply just fill that with water. And this is going to take a little while because you got to burp all of the trapped air out of that tubing. Once that's full of water, you're going to clamp off the side that's going to be used to bottle, and that will hold the water in while you connect it to your sanitized racking cane. So we'll take our airlock off. We'll place the racking cane inside the beer. When we open this clamp, the water will drain out, pulling the beer with it. We'll push the clamp closed when the beer starts to flow, and then start transferring to our bottles. You want to leave a couple fingers width of space at the top of each bottle in the neck. So just clamp it off with a little extra space, then move on to your next bottle. And your goal is to fill these bottles from the bottom, which will minimize oxygen exposure. So So try and get that tube all the way at the bottom of the bottles. And then as it gets close to the bottom of your carboy, you'll just want to tip it slightly, so that way you can get as much out as possible without sucking up the tube at the bottom. And now we'll simply cap them. I like to get started by putting caps on each of them. That way they're all kind of prepped ahead of time. And then you simply put the bell down on top, clamp it tightly, and press. I like to rotate my bottle a quarter of a turn and then clamp again, just as a little bit of an insurance policy. And simple as that, we've got 10 bottles of beer bottled. So I'm gonna put these away in a dark corner of the room and we'll come back in a month. It's been 4 weeks. Our beer should be properly bottle conditioned and carbonated. Sounds pretty good to me. Let's have a pour. Yeah, I'd say that beer is ready to go. Let's have a taste. Okay, that's pretty good. It is smooth, it is fruity and malty and rich. Has everything you want about the flavor profile of a simple beer without being watery or flabby or thin like a light beer might be. It really is like an exceptional pale ale craft beer. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please subscribe to the Craft Brew channel, hit that like button on this video, and check out our future homebrewing content. If you are interested in the ale making process, you might also check out our lager video. That video walks you through how to do some temperature controlled fermentation to do a cooler, steadier fermentation on a lagered beer rather than a room temperature fermentation like we did with this ale. So be sure to check that out. What's your favorite kind of beer? Let us know in the comments. Drop a comment with your favorite beer style, something that you always like to keep on tap at your house. Until next time, happy brewing.